Chapter 6. Luke stared into the dark night, looking up toward Razelle's window. There was no movement. There was no light. There was no sign at all that she was waiting for him. It had been 3 days since he'd been here last. In that time, had she decided that marrying him wasn't a good idea after all? He climbed the tree in silence, reaching the rooftop near her window. Tapping lightly on her window, he straightened his shoulders, confident he was doing the right thing. After a long wait, Razelle finally opened the window. From the dim light inside her room, he could see the shadowed outline of her form. As she stepped closer, he saw her clearly. Beautiful green eyes stared back at him, looking for all the world like she'd been crying. "What's wrong, Razelle?" "Nothing." She hesitated and sighed. Everything." Luke's heartbeat accelerated and his palms grew sweaty at the catch in her voice. Razelle held up a handwritten note for him to see. It was a short note saying goodbye. "That's good, right?" "No, Luke, you don't understand. It's not good." Razelle took back the note with a shaky hand. "I'm afraid I really don't know if I should be doing this. I feel guilty for leaving." "Why would you feel guilty, Razelle?" "Because she's my mother." Razelle quickly wiped away a stray tear that slipped down her cheek. "And because I remember all throughout my childhood that Mother told me, 'I don't know what I'd ever do if you left me. I think I would want to die.'" Razelle's brows puckered in worry. "I don't want to be responsible for my mother choosing to end her life." "You're not responsible for your mother's emotions or actions, Razelle. Can't you see she's trying to manipulate you?" Luke saw this clearly because he'd been down this path before. His ex-fiancée had tried to control him too. Razelle's eyes widened at his words. Luke watched the play of emotions form across her face. In a matter of seconds, her expression went from fear to shock, and finally to anger. All was quiet for a moment until suddenly heat-whispered words escaped Razelle's lips. All was quiet for a moment until suddenly the heat-whispered words escaped Razelle's lips. "You're right, Luke. My mother is trying to manipulate me. She's trying to control me to get me to stay with her forever. I won't let her use me like this." Razelle quickly turned and tossed her note on top of the dresser. Grabbing her backpack, she walked back to where he waited. Her ragdoll cat jumped onto the bed. Razelle reached for her cat, hugging her close. "I'm ready, Luke." Luke expelled a sigh of relief. "You're coming with me, then?" It was a statement. Green Eyes stared back at him. Her eyes flashed, and her jaw was set in determination before she nodded quickly. Luke grinned and held out his hand to help her out of the window. His heart accelerated as he held her small hand in his own. A sudden growing awareness blossomed inside of him that he had been entrusted with a very rare and precious gift, one he needed to protect and nurture with all possible care. Razelle's breath was uneven as she shimmied down the tree. Her cat, Sunbeam, squirmed in her arms. Luke stood on the ground, looking up as he waited. Razelle couldn't believe she was actually doing this. Her thoughts were erratic, coming and going with the rhythm of her heartbeat. Was she doing the right thing? All of her life it had just been the two of them. She knew her mother depended on her. It wasn't just that she helped at the coffee shop, but Razelle had learned how to help her mother heal whenever she was having another one of her headaches. Her mother relied on her. What was Mother going to do now that her daughter was gone? Guilt came back in full force. What kind of terrible daughter was she to leave her mother? But along with the familiar stab of guilt, knots of fear formed in her belly. Memories came back of times in her childhood when she had done something that displeased her mother. During those times, Mother had been unrelenting in the way she disciplined Razelle, whether it was isolation, missed meals, or lack of affection. All of that punishment had formed craters of heartache on the inside of her. Razelle didn't want to experience that kind of pain again. Maybe it was better that she was leaving. Suddenly, she was very grateful Luke was by her side. At last, her feet touched the ground. Razelle swayed a little as one foot snagged on a tree branch. As she began to tilt sideways, suddenly strong arms wrapped around her back, holding her steady. Roz's head tipped back, and she looked up to see Luke's brown eyes, warm like melted chocolate, so close to her own. She sucked back air, momentarily surprised by his nearness. "I've got you, Razelle." His large hand on her back sent tingles along her spine, and his warm breath tickled her cheek. Her senses swelled to overflowing. Being so close to Luke, she could smell the outdoorsy garden smell she loved so much. At Luke's words, the thought crossed her mind that she was in full agreement. She wouldn't mind staying here forever. Hearing that thought vividly in her mind caused a jolt to run the length of her body. What was she thinking? Razelle struggled to steady her own 2 feet, and heat filled her cheeks as her eyes met his. "Thanks, Luke." "Any time, Razelle." Luke winked at her and grabbed her hand. "Now, let's get out of here." Razelle anxiously looked over her shoulder at their home. She needed to look one last time. There was no light in her mother's upstairs bedroom. Good, that meant she was safe for now. Breathing a sigh of relief, Razelle hurried after Luke. As he opened the truck door, she heard him ask, "Tomorrow we'll marry, but are you okay staying at my cabin until we take care of that?" "Yes, that's fine, Luke." Razelle sat beside him, and her grip tightened on her squirming cat. She whispered, "And tomorrow I should call Cassie." "Of course. I'll buy you a phone, Razelle. We'll get things organized first thing in the morning." Luke's confident smile was the reassurance she needed. When they arrived at Grand's land, Luke opened the truck door and led her into the small 2-bedroom cabin. The dim lamp by the large wood front door highlighted the comfy sofas that faced a large wood fireplace. The living room opened up to a spacious kitchen with rows of wood cabinets and warm yellow walls. "This is a perfect spot. I love the fresh woodsy smell." Razelle smiled as she looked over at Luke. "I'm happy you like it, Razelle. The scent of wood is still fresh from the renovations I've been doing to the place." Luke shoved his hands in his pockets as he talked. Razelle caught the slightly red stain that colored his cheeks as he shared what he'd been working on. "Luke, no one could have made this cabin better. It's really great." At her words, a big grin formed on his face. "Thanks, Razelle." Luke looked over at her, and she used one hand to cover a yawn. "But here I am, talking while you clearly are exhausted. Follow me, Razelle." Luke led her into a bedroom that looked very cozy. The king-sized bed dominated most of the room. Pink blossomed in her cheeks. But this is your bedroom, Luke. I can sleep on the couch." Ah, yes, this was more like the Luke she was beginning to know. He was ever the gentleman. "I'm giving you my bedroom, Razelle, and I'll sleep on the cot in the other bedroom. That other room is too cluttered with boxes and other things. You'll be more comfortable here." Razelle nodded, too tired to argue. "All right." "You're good then, Razelle?" Luke's brown eyes narrowed as he looked at her. Tears pricked the back of her eyes. Razelle felt a tear roll down her cheek, and she hurriedly brushed it away with a sleeve. Her cat jumped out of her arms and soon curled up in a comfy spot on the bed. "I'm fine, Luke. It's just really been a long day." Luke stepped closer until Razelle was sure he could see the freckles on her nose. His muscled arms wrapped around her, and he held her gently in his arms. Razelle couldn't remember the last time anyone gave her a hug just to help her feel better. Tears ran down her cheeks. His heartfelt gesture seared its way into her heart, and her heart opened a little further to him. Who was this man? Luke had the ability to chase down thugs, to help his friends, and only a few days later here he was holding her in his arms. His gentle hug wrapped its way around her heart, chipping away at fears she kept bottled up for so long. Razelle could feel her heart opening up in a new way to his kindness. As Razelle rested her head against his shoulder, she didn't want to move away. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe and cared for. She forced herself to step back. She couldn't let herself be attracted to him. Luke handed her a tissue. "Thank you, Luke. I don't know where all those waterworks came from. I probably just need a good sleep. Razelle peered up at him through wet lashes and stepped back a little further. I'm sure that's true. Well, I won't keep you any longer. Good night, Razelle. I'll see you in the morning. Luke walked out of the bedroom and with one last lingering smile closed the door. She stood there frozen. Warmth flooded her neck and rose to her face. Her body still felt the weight of his hands as though they were still wrapped around her. And heaven help her, she wanted to feel his arms around her again. Suddenly, she realized that her initial attraction to Luke had now blossomed into so much more. She needed to rein in her feelings. She couldn't allow herself to fall for the man she was about to marry. A mixture of emotions warred on the inside. Fear and uncertainty mixed with relief, knowing that she was no longer under her mother's thumb. Now, she no longer had to worry about her mother. At least, she hoped that was true. Right now, her mother didn't know where she was, but she knew it was only a matter of time before she found out. At this moment, Razelle was very uncertain. Uncertain about her future, uncertain about her mother, and uncertain about this new marriage in name only to Luke Stevenson. Tomorrow would be the beginning of many firsts in her life. Razelle didn't know if she was ready for all the changes that lay ahead of her. Would she ever truly find the love and belonging she was looking for? Luke shifted his feet, his gaze moving from the pastor and back towards his family. It had been a busy day getting the details organized for the small private wedding ceremony. He smiled at his grandmother and mother who sat together. Luke was grateful for a supportive family, even when details of his life, like getting married, happened quickly. If it had been up to him, they would have married at the office of the Justice of the Peace. But that wouldn't have been a good idea, especially if he wanted to convince his mum and grandparents they were in love. Luke was grateful Catherine Stevenson had used her connections to ask the pastor here on such short notice. Not to mention, grandmother insisted Razelle wear her old wedding dress. His mother winked at him, and he shifted on his feet once again. Luke suddenly remembered being in this position years ago when the woman he loved left him at the altar. This time around, he was marrying without love. Yet, even though this was a marriage that would benefit them both, Razelle could still decide not to go through with it. Anxiety formed knots in his belly. Had his wife-to-be decided to run away? Luke rubbed clammy hands on his suit pants and swallowed nervously. They were already 5 minutes late, and Luke was worried. The waiting seemed to go on forever. Without warning, the music started playing in the background. He looked at the row of poplar trees that surrounded Gran's old cabin and waited. Her hand tucked inside Granddad's arm. Luke expelled a breath of relief, and his eyes widened at the sight of her. Razelle was stunning. The wait had definitely been worth it. His bride wore a floor-length dress with wide skirts that tapered upwards to her slim waist. The scooped neckline and lace-covered long sleeves only accented her slender frame. Razelle's thick, wavy, auburn hair hung past her waist, flowing gently with every graceful step she took towards him. The vintage lace wedding veil sloped over her shoulders and down her back. The long train of her wedding dress shimmered like a heavenly canopy of diamonds. It seemed appropriate that the beauty of nature surrounded them on this, their wedding day. Luke remained motionless as his bride glided the rest of the way towards him. He nodded his thanks and swallowed back emotion as his granddad placed Razelle's hand in his. He squeezed her hand. A flicker of fear momentarily shone in Razelle's big green eyes, and he gave her a reassuring smile as they turned to face the pastor. It didn't seem to take the minister very long before he got to the part where they said their vows. Do you, Luke Stevenson, take Razelle Chastain to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward? Luke listened to the rest of the wedding vows as the pastor recited them. His conscience prodded him as he replied, I do. Emotion welled up on the inside, causing him to stutter. The vow to protect, honor, and take care of his new wife was easily given. Love, on the other hand, was a feeling he needed to stay far away from. Problem was, his attraction to his bride couldn't be denied. Last night, Luke had wanted to hold her in his arms longer. Razelle had pulled away much too quickly, and Luke sensed his bride wasn't used to people in her life showing her much affection. As his bride whispered her vows to him, Luke found himself eager to hold her in his arms once again. Finally, the pastor spoke the words he'd been waiting for. "You may kiss the bride." With slightly shaky hands, Luke lifted the lacy veil that covered her face. Razelle's wide green eyes looked into his own, flickering with doubt and worry. He wanted to settle her worries and bring comfort to his new wife. Luke stepped closer and placed one hand on her waist while the other cradled the back of her head. He stared into her eyes a moment longer. There was no question his bride was beautiful. Without waiting a moment longer, his mouth came down on hers with an intensity that surprised even him. Burrowing his hand into her hair, he weaved his fingers through the silken tresses as if binding her to him. At her low moan, he gentled his kisses for fear of hurting her. But the soft, womanly feel of her was overpowering. In the end, Luke kissed her over and over again until his heart rate accelerated and seemed like it was about to burst straight out of his chest. Luke lost himself in his bride's sweetness, and at that moment he could feel the years of loneliness melt away. It was a sensation that was brand new, and he could feel his body quivering, filled with new emotions. Luke liked being close to his new wife a little too much. What was happening to him? Whatever it was, he needed to put a stop to the new surge of attraction for Razelle. This wasn't part of the deal they'd agreed on. He stepped back and stared down at the beautiful woman in front of him. Heaven help him, all he wanted to do was kiss his bride all over again. With each one of Luke's kisses, the ragged pounding of Razelle's heart rose higher and higher until the roar filled her ears. Nothing in her life had given her a sensation as potent as her new husband's kisses. As his lips explored her own, she closed her eyes, reveling in the new sensations he created inside of her. Her hands shook against his shoulders and slid up around his neck. Razelle pulled his head closer, wanting more of his sweet kisses. Luke's hands tangled in her hair gently, and she went weak-kneed from his caresses. A low moan escaped her lips. The finest of wines couldn't produce a sensation like this. Razelle trembled in his arms, and he pulled his lips from hers. His gaze met hers, large brown eyes stared at her, filled with turbulence and confusion. The look in her new husband's eyes only reflected the chaos inside of her. As the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Luke turned towards the small group of wedding guests. Razelle followed his example, pasting a smile to her lips. All too soon, Luke's brothers and their wives embraced her. She felt accepted into their close circle, something that surprised her. Luke's mother reached out and pulled her into a close embrace and kissed her cheek. "Welcome to the family, Razelle. I'm thrilled you've married my son. I really look forward to getting to know you better." "Thank you, Mrs. Stevenson." Tears pricked the back of Roz's eyes. There was only one other person in her life that had treated her so special, her childhood grandmère, who took care of her when they lived on Maria Island. Her husband's mother treated her with an unexpected kindness that caused her heart to overflow. "I'd love it if you'd call me Mum, my dear. We're family now, after all." Eliza Stevenson winked and squeezed her hand. "I'd like that very much. Thank you, Mum." Razelle's lips trembled a little by the unconditional acceptance she experienced from Luke's family. It wasn't long before Catherine and William Stevenson both embraced her. Today, she'd been taken into their close-knit family. Soon, her friend Cassie grabbed her into a hug, a lopsided grin on her face. "This was the fastest wedding ever. Are you sure you don't have something you need to tell me?" "Cassie, you know I already explained what happened." Razelle sighed heavily. I know, Razelle. You're helping each other out." Cassie leaned closer to whisper in her ear. "But the way Luke's eyes follow you, it certainly doesn't look like a marriage of convenience to me." Her friend grinned and planted a quick kiss on her cheek. "You're crazy, Cassie. He's not looking at me in any way other than as a friend." Razelle didn't need her best friend to assume things that weren't real. Besides, if Luke were attracted to her, Razelle would have noticed, wouldn't she? Cassie blew her a kiss and walked over to chat with Rory. Razelle sighed, feeling a little frustrated by their conversation. "Are you okay, Razelle?" Luke looked over at her and placed his hand around her waist, tugging her to his side. At his touch, a jolt of awareness went through her. Her new husband led her to the wooden dance floor. It was a tradition for the bride and groom to have the first dance. Razelle's fingers nervously toyed with her wedding dress. The atmosphere around them was more romantic than she anticipated, and it was wreaking havoc with her peace of mind. Music played softly in the background. Luke must have arranged at the last minute for people to bring what they needed. Lights shimmered and twinkled in different places around the backyard. "It's our turn to dance." Luke placed his hand on the small of her back as they settled in the middle of the dance floor. A country singer crooned a love song, and he pulled her close. "You look beautiful tonight, my bride," Luke whispered before he gently pulled her close. Heat rose from her neck and blossomed in her cheeks. She'd never had so many compliments in her life than what she'd received since knowing Luke. She realized her new husband might be a man of few words, but the ones he took advantage of were definitely put to good use. "Thank you, Luke. You look pretty good yourself." Razelle had never seen him look more handsome than he did tonight. His perfectly tailored suit, along with his expensive-looking watch, cufflinks, and leather shoes, looked so good on him that it sparked both attraction and fear in her chest. The mixture of emotions she experienced whenever Luke was near scared her. He was a billionaire and adept at the way things worked among the world of the wealthy, but sadly the woman he married didn't know the first thing about how to dress, how to act, or how to be part of his life. Razelle was certain it wouldn't be long before her husband realized it too. When he did, he would understand that she didn't belong in his world. Suddenly Luke pulled her closer and kissed the top of her head. His muscular arms wrapped around her waist. Razelle started to pull away from him, but he tightened his arms around her waist, rubbing one hand on the small of her back. "Stay with me, please, Razelle." Luke pulled back slightly so he could look into her eyes. "We're newlyweds and supposed to be in love, remember?" The circular motion of his hand on her back and his whispered words had their desired effect. Being in her husband's arms brought up a yearning for more than a marriage in name only. "I'm sorry, you're right, Luke," she spoke softly. Silently, she chastised herself for letting her emotions get away from her. It was part of the deal they'd made for this marriage. Without warning, he gently placed her arms around his neck, pulling her closer. "I think we need to be more convincing, my bride." Luke's brown eyes crinkled at the edges, and the corners of his lips turned up. She couldn't help but offer a small smile in return, even though being so close to him made her feel vulnerable. Leaning his head down, her new husband placed a gentle kiss on her forehead, on her eyelids, and, at last, his mouth landed on her own. Hungrily, his lips nipped and pulled, devouring hers until her whole body felt like liquid jelly. As her knees started to weaken from his lingering kiss, Razelle forced herself to pull her arms away from around his neck. "I think we've convinced the wedding guests, Luke," Razelle whispered and stepped back a little to put some distance between them. She was very afraid that their kisses had begun to convince her heart that maybe it would be possible for them to fall in love. But no, that couldn't ever happen. More than ever, Razelle knew she needed to put walls up around her heart. She needed to do whatever it took to avoid being hurt by someone she loved ever again. As Razelle stepped away from Luke, he couldn't help but be overcome by a sense of loss. He didn't understand why he would feel this way, especially since he was just getting to know his new wife. Luke's heart leapfrogged into his throat, and he wanted to grab his bride back into his arms, but something told him to leave well enough alone. The fact that Razelle stepped away from him was probably for the best. Maybe this way he could ignore his attraction to his wife. Maybe this way he could ignore his longing to know his wife. Maybe this way he could ignore his desire to love his wife.